Thank you, comrades. I've got a lot to say. Not much time to say it in. So fasten your safety belts, because once I start, I probably will just keep going until I finish. But I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you the story of the collusion between the state in the form of the ANC government, Lonman in the form of capital, and the trade union, the National Union of Mine Workers, who have capitulated, who now support the trade union, the government. All of those parties have the same vested interest in breaking the strike at Marikana, and they developed a strategy for that strike to be broken. The strategy was this. First, the strike had to be recategorized, not as a labor dispute, but as an action of criminals. 3,000 criminals, all of whom were engaged in an illegal strike, who were involved in unlawful assemblies, and who were involved in violence. That was the first part of their strategy. Once they'd achieved that, the second part was to saturate Marikana and Lonman with police officers and weapons. The third part of the strategy was to arrest the leaders, and the fourth part of the strategy was to drive the workers back to work. From Lonman's point of view, nice work if you can get it, short, sharp strike, cost you very little, the state pays for the whole lot, and they do all your dirty work. But each of them had a contribution to make towards that strategy. The National Union of Mine Workers, that once mighty union, is an utter disgrace. Let me just go through what they did. From day one, they organised the scabbing. I have seen a number of emails. I've seen a lot of documents, some of which I refer to, some of which I'll read out. I've seen a lot of emails which go from the full-time branch secretaries of the National Union of Mine Workers to the Human Resources Department of Lonman. And they say things like, you provide the transport, we'll provide the workers. What time can you get us there? If you get us a bus by 4 o'clock in the morning, we'll get you 50 workers on the bus. Time and time again, you see these emails in order to try and break the strike. The second thing they do is to shoot strikers in the back. Can you believe that? Shoot strikers in the back on the 11th of August, 2 or 3 days into the strike. 3,000 strikers go down to the National Union of Mine Workers offices, as they are entitled to do because they're the union that represents them. And the evidence is, and the interesting thing about this evidence, as a lawyer, it's not coming from my side. This evidence is coming from the National Union of Mine Workers. Their representative told the Commission that we organised with weapons, including guns. We went out to confront them and we shot. In fact, the barrister, or the advocate as they have, for the National Union of Mine Workers, was quite happy to tell the Commission at the very outset, the National Union of Mine Workers will in due course lead evidence that in the circumstances the use of firearms by the National Union of Mine Workers members was justified. Thirdly, Zakwana, the president of the National Union of Mine Workers, he turns up at the Lonman offices on the 12th of August, a day later, and he discusses documents that I've seen. He discusses with the Lonman executives how best to break the strike. Fourthly, he comes out of that meeting, and the first thing that he does is to pick up his mobile telephone. How do I know this? Zakwana came to the Commission and he told us he's proud of what he does. He rings up the Minister of Police and says, we have to break this strike. He tells the Minister of Police that he wants the army and he wants the police down at Marikana fast. Fifthly, what does he do? On the day after that, on the 13th of August 2012, he issues a press statement. National Union of Mine Workers call for a special task force for the mines. A task force to break the strike. What does it say? We call for the deployment of a special task force or the South African National Defence Force to deal decisively with the criminal elements in Rustenburg and its surrounding mines. That is signed by Frans Bellany, the National Union of Mine Workers General Secretary. So that is the contribution that is made by the National Union of Mine Workers to the strategy to break the strike, to bring in the police, to make certain that Lonman wins this case and the whole strike is broken. Lonman, they have their own contribution. From the very outset, in fact, they have really devised the strategy. From day one, which is the 9th of August, they're on the telephone. They're not on the telephone to Dixon of Dock Green. They're on the telephone to the most senior police officers inside the Northwest Province. on the telephone to the most senior advisors to the Prime Minister of the Northwest Province. And what they're asking is exactly what they got. We want police officers down here. We want you down here with the weapons. So from the statements made by executives, Cotley, I made several telephone calls to Colonel Maraf, expressed concern that SAPS had allowed a march to proceed, although illegal. Then he says, Lonman decided to take immediate steps to make contact with authorities at a high level in order to increase the police deployment. The SAPS team that they'd sent was not sufficient. I called the special advisor to the Prime Minister, and on it goes and on it goes. These are people who have contacts. They're people who are with the police, who are with the state, and they know precisely what it is that they need to do in order to break the strike. So they devise the strategy. So they ring up these people. But at the core, at the real core of the organisation against the miners is disclosed in emails. There are a number of emails that we've managed to get inside the Commission, and I'm going to read some of those to you. But at the core of the core is a man called Cyril Ramaphosa. And for those of us old enough to remember when Cyril Ramaphosa was a great, great man, the General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, it is somewhat gutting to see this man as being, I think, the second wealthiest black man in South Africa. And as you heard from Peter Alexander, there 23% he owns of Lonman. But let me tell you, he owns 100% of McDonald's South Africa. He is a man of real substance. And he is the man really behind the emails. So let's just have a look at that. But before I do that, I see that I should have told you the sort of correspondence that exists between the Lonman directors and the Minister of Mines. And this takes place on the 13th. There's a wonderful insight as to how the ruling class operate. So there is a letter from Lonman to the Minister of Mines, Susan Shabangu, 13th of August 2012. Honestly, you think you got it out the Socialist Worker or something. It says, the state should bring to bear on this crucial sector of the economy, using resources at its disposal to resolutely bring the situation under control. The police and the army presence needs to be planned. So that is, we move on a day or so to these emails, and I say at the core is this man, Cyril Ramaphosa, to be the next Vice President of the Republic of South Africa. Now, I'm sure you're paying attention, but pay attention to these emails. You learn something. I did. You learn something about how the ruling class operates, about how the state operates with employers. So here we have the first of them from Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's writing to one of the senior directors of Lonman. He said, Dear Roger, thank you for your briefing notes. Had a discussion with Minister Susan Shabangu. I called her and told her that her silence and action about what is happening at Lonman was bad for her and the government. She said she was going to issue a statement. I spoke to Zakwana, the president of the National Union of Mine Workers. He and Frans Bellany want to meet me to discuss what they should do next. I will be speaking to Matache, the ANC General Secretary, and suggest that they should intervene. I spoke to the Deputy Chairman of the Chamber of Mines and discussed the matter. There should be contact with the Chamber of Mines. Interesting stuff. The director replies, Hello, Cyril. Thank you for your help so far. The minister was on the radio today saying that she had been briefed and that this was a wage dispute and the management and unions should sit down and sort it out. Not sure who's briefed her. We are waiting to talk to her. Although it's not too damaging, it's also not too helpful. I've had discussions, and this case is not to be characterised as an industrial relations matter, but the issue is one of civil unrest and a criminal issue that could not be resolved without political intervention and needs the situation to be stabilised by the police and the army. Cyril writes back, Dear Albert, I thank you for the consistent manner in which you are characterising the current difficulties we are going through. The terrible events that have unfolded cannot be described as a labour dispute. They are plainly, dastardly criminal and must be characterised as such. In line with this characterisation, there needs to be action to address this situation. You are absolutely correct in insisting that the Minister, and indeed all government officials, need to understand that we are essentially dealing with a criminal act. I have said as much to the Minister of Safety and Security. I will stress that to Minister Shabangu when she has her discussions with Roger, the Director of Lonman. This is all on the day before the killings take place. Ramaphosa writes back just a couple of hours later, "Dear all are all of the directors of Lonman. I have just had a discussion with Susan Shabangu. 1. She agrees that what we are going through is not a labour dispute, but a criminal act. She will correct her characterisation of what we are experiencing. 2. She's going into Cabinet and will brief the President, as well as get the Minister of the Police to act in a more pointed way. Let us keep the pressure on them to act correctly." That is just a most remarkable insight as to how the state and the employers operate together. And of course, it was successful. Here we've got Shabangu, who initially was saying that this was a labour dispute and should be sorted out with management and the unions, who now completely switched. This was a criminal act. This was the first part of their strategy. Now, let me refer you to when Susan Shabangu was not the Minister of Mines, but was the Minister of Police. She was very good in relation to violence. Just listen to this, what she thought, because they run a shoot-to-kill policy in South Africa. About 800 civilians are killed every year. So when she was Minister of Police, she issued a statement saying the following: "You must kill the bastards if they threaten you. Do not worry, I want no warning shots. You have one shot. It must be a kill shot. Police commissioners should know they have permission to kill these criminals. I will not tolerate pathetic excuses. You have been given the guns, now go and use them." So now you know what's going to come. This is the woman who's shifted her position. The strategy is working. The guns and the police officers are going to be sent into Marikana. Meanwhile, Lonman are busy. They've got a strategy from the very outset because they set the strategy. They're in there helping the police. This is what Lonman provide to the police: a headquarters, a place where they can go and have their cups of teas and discussions, but they also provide the banks of monitors that they can watch what is happening with the strikers on the hill and other parts. Lonman brief the police, senior police officers, as to what they should be doing twice each day. The police ask for a Lonman senior executive to be present each and every day and a substitute if he or she is not present in the police headquarters. The police allow Lonman executives to monitor police radio traffic so that at all times Lonman know precisely and exactly what is happening. Lonman provide the fire brigade and services for the 16th, the day of the killing. So they must have known in advance what sort of day that was going to be. Lonman, at the request of the police and on behalf of the police, contract with medical services to be provided on the 16th, the day of the killing. Lonman agree with the police that they will provide detention facilities for all those arrested on the day that everyone is killed. Lonman discuss with the police that they might be able to provide them with razor wire. They provide all of those facilities to Lonman. What is perhaps more disgusting, really, is that there is an agreement that once this is all over, the police, of course, it's a huge action in South Africa, huge. So once it's all over, all these generals and brigadiers, they're going to want to retire to consider their verdict, aren't they? They're going to want to retire and debrief themselves. So Lonman offer them, and it is accepted, the Lonman Game Farm. So off they can retreat after it's all over and decide what it is that they're going to tell this world. But Lonman are still worried. They're still worried that perhaps it just won't come off. So there's another email to Cyril, which says the following. Hello, Cyril. We are grateful that the police now have about 800 on site. Our next challenge is sustaining this and ensuring they remain and take appropriate action so that we can get people back to work. It would be good to have some independent confirmation that the police have plans to sustain a presence at least for a week and the numbers don't dwindle by the weekend. If you can talk to the minister, would you please influence these things with her? So this is the 15th, the day before the killing, but you can see where London is coming from and precisely where they want to go to. So the scene is set. The scene is set for the killings and what happens. And you've heard both from Peter and from Peter Hain as well. 800 police, 800 pistols each one has, gas grenades, stun grenades, water cannon, and the notorious R5 machine gun rifles, which you heard fire at the rate of 600 rounds a minute. What you should know about that rifle is this, that it was originally a rifle called the Gahali rifle, which was developed by the Israelis to shoot the Palestinians. It was manufactured by the apartheid regime to shoot the ANC. It's now used by the ANC to shoot black miners. It is a lethal weapon that should be nowhere near a public order situation. The miners run for their lives as they see the barbed wire being dragged out. There are 16 shots, which you might have seen on your television when you see the drrrr. It is horrific. But perhaps, I was going to say not more horrific than what happens next, but what happens next is really, really awful. The miners are pursued over the ground. They're followed by armoured trucks. They're followed by police officers on horseback. They're followed by the dog unit. And they're shot at. They're shot at and they're executed. And that's really what happens. It is so shocking. It is so shocking. We play this piece of video at the Commission time and time again, and somehow you think you'd get used to that. You don't. Every time you see it, it's even more shocking. What is at least as shocking is the absurd reaction of the police. 270 miners are charged with the murder of 34 of their colleagues, and they're detained in prison for a fortnight until they can get out. The police say, well, of course they're guilty of murder, because had they not come in our direction, because we thought they were going to attack us, right, we wouldn't have fired on them. So it was the strikers who caused us to fire on their colleagues, therefore they're guilty of murder, and we were only acting in self-defence. What an absurd position to be in. But that is point one of the absurdity. Point two is the very idea that they suggest that this is self-defence. Self-defence, I deal with self-defence all of the time. And what you have is people coming towards you with a knife, or you might have people attacking you or fighting you. What you don't have are 14 people who've been shot in the back whilst running away to safety, 4 people who've been shot in the back of the head, 32 out of 34 people who've been shot above the waist, because if you're actually really and truly saying that you're defending yourself, you would have shot either into the air or you might have shot on the ground. In the very worst scenario, you might have shot towards the feet. But each of these people have been shot in the buttocks and the back, in the backs of the leg, but really the back of the head. And that really is the absurdity of that position. The consequences of what have happened is absolutely horrendous. Now, I write back to some of my family and friends and tell them what I'm doing at Marikana. So you might have to put up with these sort of long type of text messages, but you'll get the message there. So let me just read you a couple of statements that miners who were shot, and the first man was in fact shot in the back, the evidence that they have given to the Commission. And this is from Mr. Patzer. I do not read, I do not write. I was in school 1 year, in the mine 30 years. I'm a rock driller. It's painfully hard, heavy machinery. The machine hits the rock and their fingers are cut off. The machine sinks in and the roof falls down. Many have died in that mine. I was there on the 16th. 34 were killed. The Nyalas, the arm-plated vehicles, dragged the razor wire close to us. We ran to escape. We were outpaced, fired on, tear-gassed, water cannon. We emerged from the corral. We are shot at with live ammunition. I jumped over live bodies, fallen bodies, the dead, the injured, my colleagues. My left toe was shot through. I cut off my left toe with my bush knife in order that I could run. I noticed people coming out and being shot. Their hands were raised, surrendering. They were asking for forgiveness. My children are traumatized. That's the evidence that he gave to the commission. Then we've got Mr. Magadiwani. And I write to my friends and family and say this. To the commission, he came on crutches, his body riddled with shots. Zoxolo Magadiwani from the Kayana village in the Eastern Cape, 24 years old, sat at the witness table, his dad allowed to sit with him. On the 16th, I went to the corral to check on my cow, then to the copy to join the strikers. The workers insisted that we do not leave. The employers must come and address our grievances. We were fenced in by the police. I ran in the direction of the settlement. The armoured Nyalas outpaced me. I was tear-gassed, water cannon, shotguns from behind. I ran to the corral to hide. I emerged. There was machine gun fire. I was hit in the left leg. I heard voices, police approaching. They got to me. They shot me several times. I was on the ground. In my abdomen, in my testicles, in my chest, in my left elbow, in my thigh, I pleaded, kill me. I gave my name so that my relatives could identify my body. A policeman said, you are going to die anyway. There's no need to finish you off. The others were laughing and taking photographs and kicking the bodies. One showed mercy and said, he's a child. Take him to hospital. I was unconscious for 2 weeks. I have been charged with murder of 34 minors killed by police. I was in court last week, remanded to custody. Doctors say I am highly unlikely to have children. There were other witnesses, are there? But the impact on the families, the impact on the wives, on the mothers, on the fathers, on the brothers and the sisters is vast. Every minor supports probably somewhere between 12 and 15 of his relatives, and often they're quite young and they pay the school fees. And so a statement from Mrs. Zameka Nungi. She says, I just want to say I'm married to Jackson. He's a Lonman rock driller. We live in the Eastern Cape, 1,000 kilometres away. We have 6 children. Jackson supports us, and his sister's 3 children, and his brother's 3 children. We are building a home. We spoke telephonically every day. Just before the strike, Jackson told me that he worked hard but earned little. I became frantic on the 16th. His phone was off. We wanted to see his body, but they would not allow us. Instead, they told us to choose a coffin. I'm hurt. My children are badly affected. My 3-year-old keeps asking for their dad. Now, she told me that on the 24th of November of last year. There is allegedly a tradition at Lonman that if someone dies at the pit, then someone from the family can take the job. And so what I then find from Mrs. Zameka Nungi is she says this, I am leaving my 6 children. I am going 1,000 kilometres to Lonman. She has arrived. She has rented a shack to live in. But she doesn't know this. The shack is empty because the previous tenant is deceased. It was her husband. And here is a woman who is perhaps 30, and she's left her 6 children because they're starving. This is what we're dealing with in Marikana. I have a couple of others to deal with. I write to my friends on the 14th of December. One of the things I say, today the Commission was informed that Mr. Marvellous Pafana, rock driller, married, 1 child, born 10th of February 78, shot 16th of August 2012. The lead is still in his body. He was to be a witness. He came to the Commission on crutches, traumatised, hanged himself on the 8th of December 2012 at Marikana. That's not the first. That's not the first that I write home. There are 7 young men who kill themselves. On the 12th of May this year, I wrote home, Langani Mabudiana, 27 years, survivor of the massacre at Marikana. Subpoena to the Commission to give evidence. Yesterday, the 6th of May 2013, found hanged from a tree on a hill at the scene of the massacre of Marikana, where he was shot. Absurdly charged with 270 others, charged murder of 34 minors that were killed by the police. He was accused number 142. Beneath the tree, his worldly possessions, a key to the mine compound accommodation, a Lonman clocking off, clocking on card, and a 2-litre bottle of a soft drink. That's what he had for his worldly possessions. Mr. Sokanili was pursued by the police. He ran for his life. He must have ran maybe half a kilometre when he runs through a stream or a small river, which may be somewhere 3 or 4 metres wide and maybe half a metre deep. But he outruns the police officer who's chasing him. And he gets through, so he's down the hill, he's through the stream, and he rises. But the marksman carrying the gun waits, and he is shot through the back of the head. We know, because we've been able to discover this, that it was at a range of 74.1 metres that he was shot in the back of the head. If you think that is bad, his comrades go to the Eastern Cape to tell his mother. She dies of a heart attack there and then. She is buried on the same day, in the same plot, in the backyard of the house with her son. These are the consequences of Marikana. These are the consequences of the government and Lonman trying to crush and break this strike. Do you think that for one moment? Do you think for one moment that the police were apologetic? Do you think anyone apologised? No, they think they've done good. They think that perhaps they've broken the strike. And so the National Police Commissioner, a couple of days later, she lines up all of the officers who were responsible for pulling that trigger. And she has it videoed. The audacity of the woman, the cheek of the woman to have it videoed. I know why she's having it videoed, because she's sending it around every single police station in South Africa. And what does she say to these people? She says this: "Good morning. I'm grateful to God. I am here to say, stay strong. All of you are going through a trying time. Let us take note, whatever happened. You did your best. You did what you were being responsible for. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having done what you did. All we did was our job in the manner that we are trained. We are hurting. We need to be taken care of. We are bruised. Ours is a journey that is not about to stop. Ours is a journey that is not negotiable. I would like to congratulate each and every one of you. I want you to applaud yourselves." And at this point, the video stops and all the police officers who killed the people at Marikana applaud themselves, together with the National Commission, who applauds everyone else. And then she goes on to say, "I want to say we love you all. We love you truly." And then she turned to the survivors and made some crass comment. But that is the confidence that she has. Comrades, what I've said here is the true story of how the state slaughtered workers in defence of capital. Thank you.
The next speaker that we have the privilege to speak is Makhanya Siphamandla, a miner who worked with Anglo Platinum, the largest South African company. Makhanya was at the forefront of leading a strike that lasted for 10 weeks. And I'd like to welcome him to actually tell his part of the story.
I'm greeting everyone, comrade. My name is Makhanya, as the lady have mentioned. I'm the workers' committee. I'm the strike committee. I'm the AMCOL leader, which is a union that I've joined later. I've worked on the mines almost 11 years. I've started to work in Gauteng, where I was going underground 3.7 kilometers down. And then I moved to Rustenburg in the Anglo-American platinum mine, who knows as Amplus. I've worked there. I'm almost 5 years working again. I will explain that the conditions that we work on over. When we are going underground, it's not just this amount we demand in the company, maybe we don't deserve it. When you go underground, now I'm working 1 kilometer down underground. In the condition that I'm working at is on a height of 1.2 meters, is a maximum place that you can work. You can work on the place. It's supposed to be 8 hours, but you can't complete this job in 8 hours. So we stay here almost 12 to 14 hours without getting food, sometimes without getting water. And then in this condition we're working on, the only things we have a lightweight that you can use is the things maybe you can uplift of 25 kilogram, but you can uplift even the things of 80 kg alone. And the condition of working, everything that we do in the mine, there is no better job. There is no better job in others, whether you are RTO, whether you are the scrap winch driver. I'm the scrap winch driver. I'm working on the night shift during the previous times. So when we're working there, after a blast, the morning shift, as they've mentioned, Jim, the morning shift, we're almost working with the drillers, which are RTOs. After they drill, they will blast. After they blast, I must come and take all the rocks from the place to surface. So during these workings, we get highlighted with the smokes, because after blast, we're using another chemical which is known as Amflex. This is a chemical we use to blast. So after blast, the platinum is too soft. So after blasting, there is a silica dust where we are working for. So we get affected by this dust, where you can find almost 50% or 75% of the workers in the mine, when they get sick, is because of this dust. And then they're known as silicosis diseases. But unfortunately, the hospital we use almost is the private hospital, which is the doctor working there, they get paid from the company again. So they don't define the silicosis and the TB. When someone gets sick, they say, no, it's a TB, and then they chase him away from the company. So we're facing those problems when I'm talking with this chemical, Amflex. This chemical, when you are working, after blast, whether you have highlighted with this chemical or not, it can enter in your skin, in the wound in the wound. So it can make a deformity of water in the lungs. I have been affected also. So the condition we're working on, we're supposed to work every job that we're supposed to do underground, not a normal job as a specific job that I've mentioned as a winch driver. I'm doing every job that I'm supposed to do underground. They've mentioned as a multi skill. They say it is a team. It's like when we are playing the soccer, anyone can close any position. So I'm working each and every job that I must do underground. When my brother is not at work, I'm becoming RTO today. Tomorrow I'm the winch driver. Tomorrow I'm the stop team. I'm supposed to support the ground underground. So all this condition we are working on is not just we have some flexibility to work. We work under the pressure of the bosses, not just say only the bosses. When you're underground, we're supposed to pray other men when you say he is my boss. I must do whatever he said, no matter the condition or how it look like. I'm forced to do this to do this work. When the place is not safe, it's a matter of must to enter on the place, because if you don't, they say you refusing instruction, and then you can get charged or you can get suspended. And later, before we start a strike, we have tried to engage the company, because as I'm earning 6,000 a month, this is a salary of almost 95 of workers on the mine they've got. On this salary, you're supposed again to have a transport to go at work. The company didn't provide you with transport. The company didn't provide with us with food. You must get food from the work because you can spend plus minus 14 hours underground. You must get a transport to go there. Where you stay, you must pay the rent. We are still staying in the place where there is no electricity, where there is no water. You must start to go to all these things. So we demand that the company, they must pay us at least a better amount to afford to go, because I'm coming from KwaZulu-Natal. From my home to Rustenburg, where I'm working, is plus minus 1,000 kilometers. So I can't afford even to go and see my family month. Maybe I go to my family twice a year because it's too far. It's not easy to affordable. I'm almost spending plus minus 3,000 around the place where I'm staying. When I'm talking with 6,000, when you change it, maybe from the pound, it will be 400, the money we got a monthly when you're working on the mines. And you have mentioned before, Guti, when you are working on the mines, when you compare us with other people working outside the mines, we also get the similar amount. Someone who's working on the garage will got on the same amount we got. So our painful and the message that have been sent with the government to us after they shooting the workers from Marikana, it was the clear message to other mines that they must retreat. They must never go in a strike. The strike have started at Aquarius, it's moved to Impala, and then it's moved to Lone Mill. After that, it's moved to my company, which is Anglo. We have been in a strike almost 10 weeks. So we have stayed almost 3 months without a court salary. We have retreated with some problem that we have received through the state. When the police were hunting for us left and right wherever you go. So, and again, we have realized that the mass of workers, they're still behind us, but not all of them. So when you are the leader, you must look people who are following you, how many were there. We're starting a strike, we were almost 64,000. But in the almost 9 to 10 weeks, we were about 30,000. The rest, they've already moved away from their home, Eastern Cape, Mozambique, wherever they came. So we have realized that concerning for this situation we are in now, we must retreat, because even the company, it was too difficult to engage with us. We said we are not recognized because we are fed up with the union, specifically NUM, with the National Union of Mine Workers. Usually it's not a National Union of Mine Workers, it's the National Union of Management. I'm correcting you, sir. So, comrade, later on when we retreat and come back on the strike, we have sit and talk each and every week. We have some mass meeting. Before I come here on the Sunday, we're supposed to have even the mass meeting. When I'm on this mass meeting, we found that there is I don't know how can I call them, the killer. We have been sent with NUM to come and shoot us. So we retreat, we didn't make this meeting. Before I come here on the Monday, there was a strike around Rustenburg. They're suspending some other leaders in Timberland Shaft. So when they suspend it, we already make a strike because we don't have an alternative one. And then when you come back in the strike last day, the company have mentioned clear that early January they're going to open the wage negotiating to fix this problem that we have been facing before. But when we come in on January, they've announced 14,000 workers they're going to lose a job. So it's where they have turned off our mind, because we didn't focus to the wages now. We just focused till we're going to lose the job suddenly. So we have on these discussions until Monday. When Monday we make a stoppage, we have demand that we can't return back to work before they open wage negotiating. So on the 11, when I'm coming here, it's where they've opened the wage negotiating by using the force of the workers. So after they've said they're going to retrench 14,000, we have engaged with AMCO, which is our union now, to discuss this issue until so far they've come back later around May. They said they're going to retrench 6,000. 6,000 is still the huge number that we cannot compromise on. And then We still have some problem as a new organization as AMCO. AMCO is a new union. It have a new leadership, unexperienced ones. Those problems, daily night, they still retrenching people by dismissing them because they realize, they minimize our knowledge that we are not well equipped. Even the company, they were still not recognizing us as the union. But as workers, we have said we join AMCO as an alternative one now, but it doesn't mean you put our faith on AMCO. We're still believing in ourselves. We can move out and fight for the reality, because when you start to trust any union, it can do the same which NUM have done. So we join AMCO, but after working hours, we meet as workers to observe the role of AMCO. It can work for us or not, because during this situation I'm talking about, we have called our president many times to say, we have a problem. Our leaders here will get suspended. He didn't come in time. But when we make a stoppage, he suddenly come when the management called them. So we point him with finger and said, it seems as now you are presenting management. We make a strike, suddenly you come, but when you call you, it takes the time to come. So you are looking in things like that one, because we have seen before how the union have treated us. So as the workers at AMPLUS, we are demanding 16,000 as a better living wage. Because when you can look from our government, they said almost better life to all. So now we determining the living wage. We said there is no better life to all if there is no living wage. Suddenly they send the police to come and shoot us. It shows clear there is someone who's fooling someone here. Because now we start to talk the same language when the government, they've mentioned, say better life. We can't have a better life without to get a better salary. So our fight on this year, I think it will start soon around September, because we have realized even in our mistake that it was the mistake of other company that the state can shoot the workers at Marikana. We have realized that when you're going to be a striker this year, we must go in a striker, all of us, all the 9 provinces where there is a mine, because each and every province in South Africa, there is a mine. So when we submit our demand, we say to one demand, one strike at a time. It's where maybe going to have a voice. I don't think South Africa, they're going to have enough police to come and shoot the whole South Africans in all these provinces. So we say we still need a support to everyone who can give us a support. We have thanks for those who get shot before. On which way we said they were better those who were shooting were better those who were dead with a living idea than to live with a dead idea. We are still fighting for we can't go back, because it's not going to assist anyone to go back. In the situation that we are living in the condition that we are living, we clearly know there is some other people in South Africa who are earning more than $1 million per month. But we clearly know that South Africa as a whole, mining is a spinal cord of that. Without mining, there is no South Africa. So we are aware that we deserve better things than they offer us. Thank you, comrade.
Our final speaker tonight is Rehad Desai, who has been a long-standing member of SWP and the founder of our sister organisation in South Africa called the Democratic Left. Rehad is a documentary filmmaker, and it is through his documentary filmmaking that he has actually become involved in the Marikana support committee and support campaign. So I welcome Rehad.
Thank you, comrades. I just want to say just a quick couple of words of thanks to Jim and Makhanya. I was pestering Jim when we realised we were going to have faced with a commission of inquiry, that we weren't going to win our demand, a presidential commission of inquiry appointed by the president, that we weren't going to win our demand for an independent inquiry led by civil society and the trade unions and the good and the great of South Africa, but rather judges appointed by the president, so-called neutral, would determine the outcome of that commission. That commission has now been going on for over 8 months, and it looks like it's going on for another 6 months. And Jim has been steadfast in his commitment. After 2 weeks of badgering, he came out and he stayed out there. And he's managed to stay out there thanks to a number of comrades in the room, friends and supporters, and Margaret, his wife, who've been supporting him throughout this period. We owe a great debt to Jim, but the South African working class, but we also know who Jim is. Jim was the editor of the Socialist Worker, a paper in 1976, the organisation I joined following the massacre of students in Soweto, a paper that came out in the punk period which said, "Never mind the bollocks." And with a paper that could say, "Never mind the bollocks," I thought, well, that's the organisation I'm going to join.
But I got sacked.
You got sacked for it, yeah. That's right. And, you know, I think about when Jim's come and he's really shaped up the legal team that are supporting the miners and the families of the deceased miners. He's a political and strategic mind that's behind that team. And it takes me back to that. It's never mind the bollocks, here comes the SWP. And in regards to Makhanya is representative of a whole generation of worker leaders that have emerged. He's representative in terms of age. They're 25 to 30. They're all young. Many of them have got no experience in the trade unions. They come in fresh, and they come in fresh with political ideas, often some of them shaped by the likes of the ANC Youth League and Julius Malema. People who want to see economic freedom in their lifetime and who are determined to see economic freedom in their lifetime. We've had 18 years of a democracy which has only seen the inequality rise. And that's what sits at the centre of this revolt. And that's what we're facing in South Africa. And I'll speak more about that in a minute. It's a revolt which is based around the rage that many people can live in a lap of luxury, that 70% of the economy can be controlled and can go to 20% of the population, that live in huge big houses, drive fancy big cars, earn, in the case of the platinum sector, 230 times the average of a mine worker. That's the gap. We're not talking 20 times. The boss is earning more, 20 times that of a worker. That's your average manager earns 20 times more than your average worker. But your bosses in the mining sector are earning 230 times the amount of a mine worker. And when people see that, you can't hide that wealth. You can't hide the new wealth of the black elite which have tied to the ANC and owe their wealth to the ANC. Because at the end of the day, the ANC are quite simply a project to de-racialise capitalism in South Africa in order to stabilise capitalism. Because when Cyril Ramaphosa, the heroic mine worker who spoke, who has now clearly betrayed us, what did he have to say? What did his union have to say in 1987 when they emerged to challenge the mining houses? That our oppression is linked to the bourgeoisie. That the bourgeoisie can never be liberal. That they will use their might to smash us, as they're doing now. This is 1987. But the mining houses are clever bastards. They've always controlled South Africa and Southern Africa. And they've used it to, in 1991, quite quickly put the skids on the ANC, put the scarers on the ANC, lobbying them, telling them, your economic policy will lead to disaster. You will become another basket case of Africa. This place will disintegrate if you're going to talk about the nationalizations of the banks and the mines and the commanding heights of the economy. And Nelson Mandela and the leadership around him gave in. And what was the payoff? The payoff was, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we'll pursue a policy where we start seeing real black mining bosses, captains of industry that belong to the black population. And that those new captains of the mining industry are now so influential, so wealthy, that they actually pay for the Congress of the South African Communist Party. They pay for the Congress of South African Trade Unions. The ANC is no longer dependent on the trade union movement for its funds. The South African Communist Party are no longer dependent on their money from their membership. It comes from the big moguls that the mining companies have created. And what we're seeing now is a reaction, a very clear and stark reaction to that reality that we face in South Africa, where after 18 years, nothing has changed. In fact, it's got worse. Not in terms of the alleviation of poverty. A lot of people have received electricity, have received water, have received roads, but schools have been built. But they're primarily in the areas which are established industrial areas and cities and major towns of South Africa. But the new mines are being opened up where? They're being opened up in the rural areas, which have historically acted as the labour reserves to underpin the economy, the political economy of South Africa, which has for 200 years been built on a low-wage economy, a repression of labour, the compound system, a tightly policed workforce, a pass system. This was all designed to ensure that capitalism remained profitable in South Africa. When that broke away, what did they have? What did the mining houses have in 94? They had one thing. They had the assurance of the ANC that the National Union of Mine Workers will act to sustain pressure to keep wages realistic in their mind. And after 18 years of that, when young men like Makhanya and his likes have entered the mines and they've seen what the NUM is, and they've seen how the NUM cuddle up to the bosses and to the African National Congress, they've said, we're not joining that fucking union. That's not a union. And they've broken. And they've broken in their tens of thousands. 150,000 people involved in mine workers' strikes last year. Unofficial strikes. And those strikes spread to the Bastion, to the other big battalions inside COSATU. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. Moses Mayakizo. We hosted him here. People are asking me about how is Moses. I don't want to tell you how is Moses. That's too depressing. Let's stay on the positive. But the fact that unofficial strikes have broken out in the most left-wing trade union that South Africa has to offer shows actually not the strength of the trade unions, actually the weakness, that they're unable to represent their workers, they're unable to lead their workers, that their workers have to break from the bureaucracy in order to to move forward. And this is what, in breaking with the bureaucracy, they're breaking with the ideas of nationalism, they're breaking with the ideas that somehow we are somehow, as the working class, responsible for this economy, which continues to sit at the centre of our misery. The tyranny of the marketplace in South Africa means you don't get to clothe your children properly. You don't get to eat properly. You don't get to sleep properly. In Rustenburg, the fastest growing city, the centre of the platinum industry, over the last 10 years we have seen 38 informal settlements grow. Why? Because the mining houses, even though platinum is lauded as the future of South Africa's growth, as the future of the growth path, as the ability, as the crown prince of the mining sector, which will bring in the foreign revenue, and mining is responsible for 60% of all South Africa's foreign revenue, to allow us to push the economy forward and to actually build a real base for continued economic growth. Will pull us out of this recession that you guys in Europe have dragged us into. Now, that's been threatened. And that's why the guns came out in Marikana. 2 years of unofficial strikes. They said, actually, enough is enough. Lonmin, $800 million it loaned to expand its operation a year or two before the crash of 2008. By 2011, they were bleeding. They couldn't pay the money back. They were talking about refinancing. What are the shareholders going to do? And that's what's happened. What we've seen is the power where we saw corporates and the execs and the boards of the corporate mining companies and the other big companies in South Africa being able to control things 20, 25 years ago. Now it's all about the short term, because we've seen the financialization of the mining sector, where the shareholders are incredibly important. And if they're not making profit year on year out, and they made billions in the run-up to 2009, billions of euros, billions of pounds. When that's under threat, they said, well, enough is enough. We better sort these independent actions of the workers. And I mean, the prospects, let me cut quickly to the prospects. I think what we're going to see is a continued struggle for the living wage, which will mean, in many cases, that workers will be fighting for double the amount they earn. This will be a direct challenge to the political economy of South Africa, a direct challenge to the ruling class, a direct challenge to the African National Congress. And we will see further calls from the African National Congress. And as we have seen in Rustenburg today, or over the last few weeks, special armed police battalions moving in to disarm workers. We will see continued repression, and we will see continued fight back. I think this year, over the next 2-3 months, we're going to see 200,000-300,000 workers out on strike at the same time in the gold and platinum sectors and in other sectors. And they will be, and this is why, lastly, the South African Communist Party are gunning for the head of the General Secretary of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Vavi, because he's got enough sense to know that he needs to actually, in order to keep these workers in the ranks of the Federation, that he needs to put out an olive leaf. And he we managed to twist his arm to put out the olive leaf to make sure that the 30,000 workers at Anglo-American, Amplatz, Platinum Company, were not sacked, to try and use his power with the Chamber of Mines to force a deal. And he actually did. And that's why they're after him. They're after him because He's wobbled. He's not a revolutionary. He's in the centre of the battle between the left and the right inside COSATU, but they don't want him. They can't tolerate anybody who's independent of their programme at the moment, and that means we're all going to be in their sights, we're all going to be up against the wall, and these workers will need your support more than ever in the months and years to come.
Hello, I'm Ken Olende from Socialist Worker, and one of the things that I think is sort of interesting, following on from the Marikana story and the horrific stuff we've heard about tonight, is another sort of strange effect that has linked to the links between the unions, the government and so on in South Africa, which is the fact that the story was originally broken in Socialist Worker in Britain. Now, it wasn't because Socialist Worker has enormous powers of having investigative journalists, though it was actually very lucky that we had a contact in South Africa, Peter Alexander, who's luckily in this room, who had actually been to Marikana and had actually been able to get evidence of what the massacre had happened at the same time when largely around the world we were still being told this lying story that the miners had attacked the police and that the police were just working in self-defence. But I think that the thing that I want to bring out about this, what it says about what was going on, is something about South Africa, and it's something about the way that people around the world react to South Africa, because people still think of the ANC as the people who fought apartheid. They still think this is the struggle. We supported the anti-apartheid movement. This is a progressive movement. This is something we have to defend. And I think even now it's quite surprising, if you think about the situation in Britain, that you hear about the horrors of what happened in that massacre. You hear about the horrors about the way the workers have been treated. You hear about the sort of the AMCU, the kind of what the union's doing, and see it's remarkably little support that it's getting from, for instance, the British TUC. Remarkably little support from other people here, because people are caught in a political strategy from the past that says we have to support the ANC. And I think that one of the things that really comes out of this meeting and has really come out of the whole struggle around Marikana is something that says that those politics really don't work anymore. That actually, if you want to see workers fighting, if you want to see a victory for workers in South Africa, you have to abandon those sorts of politics and actually start saying that the policy which said put things on hold, we'll wait for the next stage, and then you can look back to the SACP, to the ANC as people who will lead things, that isn't going to work. You have to look to a new leadership. And I'm quite proud to be at a meeting where hopefully people who are part of that leadership are telling us what's really happening in South Africa.
Thank you, comrade.
Let me extend warmest greetings to you all, and perhaps more so to the brothers, the comrades from Azania, South Africa. It's been a very interesting reportage of the development there. And in response to the massacre on the 16th of August this year, a group of us went to the South African embassy and started our protest on the 17th. We have established what is known as the Marikana Miners Solidarity Campaign. And I have my banner there. I don't know if you would like to see that. We have gotten very little support from the left in Britain. But our purpose is not to attack the left. We want to unite with you because we think it is important that we mobilize support for the working class, the African working class in Azania, South Africa, who is waging a fierce struggle against the brutal and neo-colonial regime of ANC Zuma. That which you present to us today is undoubtedly the behavior, the act of a fascist regime. It is nothing less. And to characterize it anything less than that is a mistake. Therefore, we want, brothers and sisters, as George Jackson said, that the dying so far have been one-sided. And from now on, for you as mine workers, is to organize yourself in a force capable of delivering a crushing blow to those who wish to suppress your legitimate right to your struggle and to end the oppression which is a feature for hundreds of years. So I want to thank you very much. And we're having a meeting tomorrow in Brixton. We're having a meeting, also planning a meeting for the 16th. We want a big picket at the South African Embassy on the 15th. And we're planning a meeting to mark the 16th, the anniversary of the Marikana massacre. But what we want to know, brothers and sisters, and particularly from the African community, is how can we best serve and best support the struggle? Because Trevor Ngwane, I don't know if you know of him, he spoke to us and he said we must continue the struggle. And it is extremely difficult. Thank you very much.
I think we have another challenge. The headquarters of Lonmin is about 50 yards down the road from Hyde Park Tube Station, about a mile away from Buckingham Palace. In fact, Anglo-American, the conglomerate that owns Amplat's headquarters, is not in Johannesburg anymore. It's just down the road by the Mall, about a mile and a half away from Buckingham Palace. I've actually been in Anglo-American's headquarters, and when you go in, there's a big golden lioness ready to pounce on you. Menace. I mean, what they've done is they've recycled their centre of operations from Johannesburg to London in order to use London as a global platform for repeating apartheid around the world. So I went to South Africa just 6 weeks ago because people in Colombia are fighting against South African mining corporations. And so you have a sort of a new triangle of power, which includes Johannesburg, includes specifically London, but is also in Latin America and elsewhere in the world. So I think we have a double challenge. The first is when the workers' movement fights again in September, we should be mobilizing here, because actually it's not just there. The challenge isn't just there, it's here. And the second challenge, when I was there, the left has reconformed itself in South Africa, reconfigured. And it's a combination. The DLF is a combination of different political and social forces. In fact, this type of new combination is happening all over the third world. And maybe we could learn something from them about reconfiguring how we work here as well. There are many people in this country who were shocked by what they saw on the TV in Marikana, just as we were shocked when we saw Soweto. We have the possibility of a broad democratic mobilization to really hurt them here. Let's do it.
Thank you, comrade.
Jonathan Neal, first, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Second, I think there might be something we can do in return a little bit, which is Rehad makes films. When large numbers of people go on strike, we could stream one of those workers on Skype into our workplaces on the lunch break. All you need to do is get 10 people from work around a computer in the lunch break, with somebody, a miner from South Africa, speaking not to the world, but just to just to us. The technology is easy. You do the collection. Once we start doing that a few times, we could do it all over the country, and we could speak across the world to each other. It would have an electric effect. The second thing is that after Marikana, it looks possible that the old alliance that has controlled the country for 20 years will be broken. This is an enormous risk for Lonmin and the mining houses and the ANC to take. An enormous risk with their control. They took this risk because they had to. What Erdogan did in Istanbul, in being prepared to take on mass demonstrations and mass strikes in the country because he had to put up a supermarket. What that supermarket represented was the whole of Turkish neoliberalism. They are coming for us relentlessly again and again and again and again, the employers, because they have had a crisis of profits for 40 years. Their solution to that crisis of profits was to take a larger and larger share of the national income for capital and a smaller and smaller share for workers. And that has not solved their problem. Their problem with profits is even worse. They had the crisis in 2008, so they must come back again and again. The world is deeply unstable because the people who run the world
please, comrade.
are unstable and savage and no longer in control of their system. It is capitalism run wild, and we have to stop it.
Thank you. People can ask questions if they want to.
I just wanted to say how fantastic it was to hear the stories, particularly of the trade union organisation in South Africa, because it makes such a contrast. Because I've seen films about the appalling conditions of mining in South Africa, but they normally come from NGOs kind of asking you to either boycott or give £2 a month to help miners' children get educated. And actually it makes you completely passive and actually makes the people of South Africa, and I think actually it's a narrative that's quite popular across Africa, completely passive. There's no sense of agency and it completely separates you. But actually having listened to 2 meetings now with miners from Britain and now miners from South Africa, I think it's amazing the parallels, the struggles in South Africa seem to be having to sort of the struggles the miners had in Britain on a completely different scale. But I think one of the ex-miners in Britain said the capitalists, they want everything, and the only thing in Britain that has stopped them having everything since the turn of the century has been the trade union movement and workers fighting back. And I just think it's absolutely amazing to hear that narrative from South Africa, and it really breaks the really patronising kind of passive narrative that you get all the time, that these terrible things happen. It's because people are so different over there, they can't organise over there. And what it actually shows is working class people, no matter where they are, have the agency and the power to change the world.
Yes, thank you to all the speakers. Jonathan said how in the future we'll be able to Skype someone and then we can do a collection in our workplaces. We can short-circuit that process tonight. You can actually give some money as you leave. So you don't have to wait until September and the Skype to do that. And it will go to the Marikana Support Committee, which will continue to organise to support the workers who are fighting back. The second point I want to make is the Marikana miners won. And it's an incredibly important lesson that despite that level of repression, despite that intimidation, despite that mass murder, nonetheless they defeated some of the most ruthless corporations on the globe. And that's an extraordinary achievement of workers that by their own independent rank and file activity not only won over the specifics of the Marikana strike, but sparked resistance across the whole country and in areas outside the mining industry as well. Not just platinum or chrome or coal, but also the textile workers. And even down to the level of the agricultural workers, who are the most oppressed, the least organised workers in South Africa, were inspired to fight back. And it's an incredible achievement that shows what the working class can do when it's on the move. That however difficult it may seem at times, the ability of workers, because of their economic power, when they are able to turn off the tap of the boss's profits, they still have the ability to fight and to win. The third point I want to make is this. I first went to South Africa in the 1990s. In the 1990s there was a debate about whether the ANC and the SACP were the way forward for the working class. And we argued about it, and it was impossible to win. It was impossible to win because there was an apartheid government, and what were you going to do? You were going to vote for Nelson Mandela, a heroic figure who was going to bring about peace, jobs and freedom. That was the slogan of the first election after the end of apartheid. For the first time now, I feel that issue is really on the table in South Africa. For the first time, this is a very serious, broadly based political debate. I don't think that workers will throw off the belief in the ANC and the SACP overnight. But I think that debate is being addressed in an utterly different context to any that has been happened before. Apartheid meant Sharpeville, it meant Soweto, it meant the Bishu massacre, it meant Boipatong, the horrific massacres that are the tombstones in the history of South African apartheid. Now we have Marikana, which is the ANC's massacre. And it's changed the whole debate that goes on. And it means that the political structure around the working class is different. It's an incredibly important development on a world scale, I think, that's moving forward. And finally, to say, when the Marikana massacre happened, we did indeed go to the headquarters of Lon Min and other places. And I think that solidarity and those sorts of activities will be very, very important in the future. Because if there's one thing we're learning, it is that the crisis both ramps up the ruthlessness of the bourgeoisie, it also ramps up the speed at which our side can learn lessons politically about the way the world is and the potential for us to reach out to one another across the barriers of the world. And the strikes in Marikana are our strikes, are our learning curve. And we learn from those heroic fighters. We need to continue to do so and to deepen our solidarity one with another.
Hi, I've got a question. With Nelson Mandela being such a prominent figure on the international platform, do you think he is a barrier to the criticisms of the ANC? And also, what do you think about Nelson Mandela? Is a question I'd like to pose to yourself as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Alexander from Johannesburg. I just want to ask questions of each of the speakers. Firstly, to Jim, what are the chances of the Farnham Commission finding the government responsible for the massacre of 34 mine workers? Secondly, to Rehad, what's the likely future for the DLF? You know, it's responded positively to the massacre, but how's it taking that forward? What's it likely to be doing, for instance, around the election, which is held next year? And then to Makhanya, on the mines, certainly it's been the case in the past and still is the case on many of the mines, the NUM offices are also the offices of the African National Congress and the South African Communist Party. The three are very closely intertwined. But now mine workers have seen how appalling NUM is, and they've turned against NUM. And we've also had the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, who is also a cabinet minister, saying that AMCU is not a union, it's a vigilante organisation. What's the response of mine workers to the ANC and the SACP? I mean, in the past, most of them have supported the ANC in elections. But will they continue to support the ANC in elections? And if you think they will continue to support the ANC, why would they continue to support the ANC? So that's my first question, Makhanya. I've got two others, quick ones.
Quickly, comrade.
One is, why is it that you're demanding 16,000 rand a month? Why not 8,000 rand a month? Why not 20,000 rand a month? How did you come to the conclusion that 16,000 rand a month was the appropriate thing to be demanding? And then finally, can you tell us a little bit more about the Workers' Committee? Anglo Platinum is enormous. You know, I don't know how many shafts there are, 20 shafts spread across a very wide area. How did you manage to organise the Workers' Committee? How does it meet? In what way is it representative of workers? And how do you maintain the representativity? Or how did you do that during the strike? And what's been the impact of moving into AMCU? How do you manage to sustain the politics of the Workers' Committee now you're in AMCU?
Thanks, Peter. We are fast running out of time, so I'm not quite sure Makhanya will be able to answer all that. I'll take the final speaker.
Peter Dwyer, Oxford's Socialist Workers' Party. Just a question first as well. Peter asked something I was going to ask. I want to ask what you all make of the new political party launched just this week by Julius Malema. I forget what it's called. It's got a bizarre name. Economic Freedom Fighters, yeah. And about that, because the manifesto, the initial manifesto, is explicitly anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. Of course, the irony is, as a multi-millionaire and an ex-leading member of the ANC Youth League, and he was also a multi-millionaire up on fraud charges. But how should the left and the DLF orientate to that, because it is a new explicitly left-wing party? That's the question. The second thing, really, take up something what Charlie said, is that we have to remember that the miners won an incredibly powerful victory, because, as Charlie said, it encouraged tens of thousands of other workers across South Africa to go on strike across the length and breadth of the country. I think also, most importantly, and this is both a political and in some ways slightly esoteric point, is that a colleague and I wrote a chapter for a book just a month before the Marikana massacre, and the chapter on South Africa said that actually with the growth of protest in South Africa, the chapter was titled Cracks in the Monolith. And what we meant by that was we were seeing the cracks in the monolith of the domination of the ANC politically on South Africa, because it is still massively dominant politically at the ballot box. And it will, for the foreseeable future, be the electoral power in the country. However, I think Marikana smashed a morality that the ANC had a monopoly on for many years. Certainly in South Africa, that is beyond doubt. As Charlie said, people aren't going to suddenly condemn and leave the ANC in their hundreds of thousands in elections, but they've lost a moral authority, and I think that's something we need to spread around the world. But finally, the most important lesson, listening to the comrades tonight, and for the first time at Marxism, I literally had to bite my teeth and stop myself crying sitting at the back when I imagined that mother of the miner in the Rondvel in rural Eastern Cape. And if you've seen these parts of the country and how poor and desperate they are and how untouched they are by service leaving from South Africa, it literally breaks your heart. But the most important thing is, if there is a single person in this room now, if there's a single person who thinks you can bring socialism and change the world through Parliament, listen to the story of these miners. The ANC, they do not come any more heroic. They were the heroes and the heroines of the struggle. Been in prison, had their family murdered, tortured, lost comrades. They went into Parliament, they thought they could change the system, and the system changed it. That is the lesson of Marikana. You cannot bring socialism through Parliament. You can only bring socialism through revolutionary change, and that means smashing the South African state and the South African bourgeoisie with it.
Thank you, comrades. I'm going to ask the speakers to come back now, starting with Rehad.
I've been in South Africa for 20 years and I'm not used to speaking fast any longer. But I'll try my best because I've only been given a minute. So, very quickly, I came to this. I'd like to thank Jonathan Nichol. He came to South Africa a couple of years ago on a climate jobs campaign, and after a very long night of arguing, discussing and drinking, I was convinced of his arguments, and that took me into the realm of mining because it reminded me of what I'd learned at university and all those years back in the SWP about the power of mining and Harold Walpy's thesis at the time and so on. And one thing led to the other, and I was up in Marikana before they shot making a film about platinum before they shot the mine workers. I just want to talk really about two things, and that is, quick three. I think Lonmin, actually, its office in London is an empty shell. There's 2 or 3 people there. They are a South African operation, platinum company. They make all their money out of South Africa, and all their bosses sit in South Africa. We did have a British boss at the time of the massacre who was sick in hospital in the UK and sending his SMSs, trying to control things through SMS. But they're just listed over here, same like Anglo-American. So I don't buy into the Julius Malema stuff and the economic freedom fighters. It's good. It allows us to make some good anti-imperialist propaganda. But the mining companies in South Africa are run by South Africans, are primarily controlled by South Africans, with a lot of foreign investment. And we've got to remember that. I think it's very interesting, actually, the question, and Alex raised it the other day. Brazilian capital, Chinese capital, South African capital, South African-based capital. The interpenetration in the global south is huge now, and we're seeing the biggest coal reserves in the world being exploited in Mozambique, 400 kilometres to the north of us, by a huge mining company, the second biggest mining company in the world, which is from Brazil, Vale. Watch out for it. The last thing, The Marikana Support Campaign, one of its 3 pillars, one is justice for the mine workers of South Africa, and that campaign will continue for a long time after the end of the commission, because we will be facing public order offences, murder charges, serious charges of 270 miners will be up in court for the next couple of years. And that is when the real work of the support campaign really kicks in. At the moment, we're fighting, as Gramsci would say, a war of position, a war of manoeuvre. We're trying to stay hegemonic around the arguments around the massacre, keeping that to the fore. The key thing about the Marikana support campaign is it is about a support for the living wage campaign. And we have been supporting wholeheartedly the workers of Anglo-American and the other strikes that splintered off after the Lonmin workers finished, and therefore we will continue supporting them in the foreseeable future. And that's why the collection that's being held tonight is very important. And we'd like to thank all the comrades from the international organisations that are in the house tonight and have been supporting us from the sister organisations around the world. The DLF is not the sister organisation of the SWP, of the Keep Left is, and we're inside the Democratic Left Front. It's an anti-capitalist network. Actually, networks, the last thing, networks aren't enough. Actually, we need serious organisation that can respond politically and fast to very rapid moving developments, and that's why after 10 years of hibernation I've rejoined the international socialist tradition. And that's why it's important you guys over here keep it together, because we've got big fights ahead.
Thank you, Rehad.
Can I respond to some question? Can I respond to this question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, comrade, I'll first start with the question of ANCs, what the workers said concerning for ANC. It's clear we're no more supporting ANC. In the next election, we can see it. It's not mine workers who are going to vote for ANC. We must rather than look for another party. I'm not referring to Julius Malema. These guys are the opportunists. They see when you have a problem, they take it just as an opportunist. On this time, we said our vote is not going to talk for us. We'll talk for ourselves. So the political that we're going to vote, we're going to give them a mandate first before we must vote for. With second question for the Workers' Committee. It was not a simple task to form it. Anglo have a big operation, almost 20 to 30 staff. We are starting from Kuselega, which is my staff. We are starting around it when you have some meeting at night, because I'm working at night, with 5 or 10 people until we organize the whole staff of night shift. After that, we formed meetings with morning shift. We organized just only one shaft. We had 2 on this time. After we organize and then we win this shaft, we have agreed that other shaft, they will start to attend our meetings. So after we finalized we're going to make a strike, we moved from other shaft and got some few people. When they knock off at work, we talk with them to request to make a meetings on this shaft. We do for the whole only Rustenburg. After we make some meeting from other operations, the people they choose, the leaders who are supposed to lead them to add on our shafts. So it's the way we form it from Rustenburg. After that, we move from the north of Landsberg. After the company have said they're going to dismiss 12,000 people from Rustenburg, we move from north of Landsberg. It's where we have realized it now starts to be difficult. So we do the same year. There was a trespass where we are going there. It was too difficult to enter on the place, but we enter there and we organize, because everyone was aware now that there is a strike. So it was the easiest way to communicate with them. Everyone they understand. To the last question of how we demand 16,000, why not is 8,000? Basically, it's not 16,000 as a basic salary. We demand 10,000 as a basic salary. And then, as I've mentioned before, we go underground almost 3.7 kilometers down. And then we demand underground allowance, which is 1,500. And then to work underground is not safety as you are working on your office. So we demand a monthly safety bonus because the condition we're working in is not safe for us. And then we demand 30 rand a day, which is a meal allowance because we spend almost 12 hours underground. And then we demand a traveling allowance, which is 1,500 a month because we use our money to go to work. And then we demand a skill allowance because, as I mentioned, I'm come from Goldfish. The Anglo didn't train me, take me and just give them a work. So when you combine all these allowances, where they make 16,000. Thank you.
Okay, final speaker, Jim. Can I just ask comrades to remind them that there'll be a collection, and also could everybody leave the room quite promptly because it has to be set up for something else at 9 o'clock. Thank you, comrades. Jim.
Okay, well, I'm going to avoid all of the questions. Safe to say to Peter that I don't know what's going to happen at the Commission. I was around as an activist for the 1971 Commission on Bloody Sunday, and I was around as a solicitor participating 40 years later. So, you know, whether we get justice, we'll see whether we get justice there. So I'm avoiding all of the other questions. But I will tell you this, right, because I'm really a sentimental little kid, about what really happens to myself. But in the course of doing that, because Rehad Desai has mentioned our names, I'll tell you a bit about him. I have represented him for probably 30 years. He was a reckless juvenile delinquent. I pulled him off the streets many times, and I pulled him out of police stations because he was rioting on the streets many times. I am happy to tell you that he remains a reckless juvenile. And this is what he did to me. He had the audacity to organise an independent rally of striking miners. 10,000 people came up. That's pretty good, and it was a most fantastic day until I walked through the gates of that rally at the football stadium because I arrived late, and he said to me, "That's really good to see you, Jim. You're speaking next." Thank you very much. But I've been round the block a few times, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. And so I give my fraternal greetings to the 10,000 workers from the Socialist Workers' Party. And of course, we're internationalists. I know what I'm going to say. I've been there. So I speak to the worker, the most fantastic meeting of my life, really. And I do put the international line. And I do say that it doesn't matter whether you are brown-skinned from Bolivia when you go down that pit, or whether they say your skin is yellow coming from China when you go down that pit, or white from England, or black from Africa. The position is that when you come back up that pit, we are all black from the dust and the sweat and the exploitation. It was the most fantastic meeting that we had. But the sentiment, forget that. The sentiment is this. I've been back for a couple of weeks in all of this, and I do travel back to the north of England where my father was a miner, and my good friend John Charlton, who sits in the room, presented me with this book on the Tyne, on the industrial life of the Tyne, as I flick through it because it's got some cracking pictures in it. And he only gave me this a few days. There is the most magnificent banner of the miners of Clare Vale Colliery in Durham, and woven in silk in the bottom here, and this is the sentiment of it. It says this: "Workers of all lands unite, you have a world to win." Marvellous.